Hi, Chad Heitschmidt here, Application Engineer at Mechatronic Solutions. Today we'll be talking about UL508A standards for industrial control panels. So some of the things we'll be covering are Underwriter Laboratories. We'll define the industrial control panel, talk about the difference between 508 and 508A, and also the relationship between the NEC and UL. Whether or not it's required, and some of the criteria that goes into panel build. So, slight disclaimer here. This is really just an overview. You're not going to become certified as a result of this presentation, but we'll try to cover all the highlights. So, starting with Underwriter Laboratories. Underwriter Laboratories got their roots in fire safety, which quickly encompassed electrical safety, because electrical wiring and installations were frequently an item that frequently caused fires. So they are a global safety science company. They establish safety standards for many industries and many different products. They started as a nonprofit organization. However, in 2012, they actually, Underwriter Laboratories, which is a nonprofit, became the parent company of UL LLC, which is a for-profit company. Not sure the implications there business practice-wise, but I thought it was kind of unique, kind of neat to know it. UL laboratories are one of OSHA's nationally recognized testing laboratories, meaning they're approved to perform safety testing for OSHA. And the best known product safety and certification organization globally. Early on, they started a label service for products, which became the UL mark. And that was like starting in early 1900s. So products that got this, the products that passed the UL testing and regular inspection got to label with this UL mark. And you're going to see that you see that on everything from extension cords to vacuum cleaners, microwave ovens, computers. Everybody's pretty familiar with the symbolic UL mark. So what is UL508A? It is the standard for industrial control panels. Specifically for the construction and installation of industrial control panels. It provides guidelines for panel builders, some of those being what components you use, the wiring, the short circuit current rating, markings, and where they go. And it describes an industrial control panel, or defines that industrial control panel as an assembly of two or more power circuit components, control circuit components, or a combination of those. And so these components are usually the switches, terminal blocks, contactors, motor drives, transformers, all of the devices that you're going to put into an industrial control panel. That industrial control panel is intended for general industrial use at an operating voltage of 1,000 volts or less. And so general industrial use includes packaging equipment, assembly equipment, plastic injection molding, press controls, press operation, irrigation systems, fountain control, refrigeration, elevator, crane, water treatment, a lot of different industries that it encompasses. What it doesn't include is it doesn't include like motor control centers, switch gear, that sort of thing. So it's just some of those more service related and service entry related items in an electrical installation. We have UL508, and then there is kind of an extension of that is UL508A. So UL508 covers individual equipment, individual components and devices. So the circuit breakers, the power supplies, the controllers, all of that that you see, all of these components that are going to go into an industrial control panel. Where 508A covers the control panel, the assembly itself. So the enclosed industrial control panel or open industrial control panel. The UL508 is specific to components used in industrial control panels. So you're not going to find those extension cords and coffee makers in this listed under UL508. It's all going to be devices that go into that control panel. And in those control panels, we have enclosed industrial control panel and open industrial control panel. A lot of shops are certified to label both enclosed and open. The enclosed industrial control panel is one like you see up here in the top right corner. It basically just means it has an enclosure around it. Where we could also put a label on a panel like the one in the bottom left, and that would be this open industrial control panel. It's basically a panel that's intended to go in an enclosure like at the point of installation. So we can still put a UL label on that for a panel that is going to get kind of embedded into a machine, let's say. So what does this mark mean to us? Specifically, like when I see this mark, what's that telling me? So for the component side in UL508, it's that product. We know that that product has been tested and evaluated by UL, meaning samples were submitted, they were tested, they were found to meet these recognized standards, and now they can put that UL mark on them. On the control panel side under UL508A, we know that that control panel has now been built to the standards of UL508A. That label has given us that evidence that the enclosure meets those nationally recognized safety standards. It's telling us that we've utilized certified components, those components that are covered under UL508. Ensuring that we've got quality tested devices in there. And those assemblies as a whole, that control panel assembly is then subject to inspection by UL. So at any time, these panels can be inspected, usually throughout or at the end of their build phase. You'll have monthly inspections from a UL inspector. This also signifies that the panel builder has met the requirements of UL508A, and they've, which could be like circuit protection, wire sizing, space requirements are adhered to, all of that. And each one of these shops needs to have a qualified manufacturer technical representative on staff. And so basically, this is something new in the last few years that UL has implemented. To become a qualified MTR, you need to complete a UL training course and pass an exam. And then that qualification is good for 3 years. At the end of that 3 years, you retest and have to pass that MTR examination again. And that it's not a cakewalk. It's a pretty extensive test, and you need to know that UL508A standard from front to back pretty well. So how does UL relate to the NEC, let's say the National Electric Code? So NFPA 70 is that National Electric Code. We usually refer to it as the NEC. And the NEC is, it's the code accepted by most agencies in the United States for the installation of electrical equipment. So that's going to be more akin to the service installations, that electrical service that gets installed. So the UL standard looks at the construction of the panel. So that basically covers the construction of the panel assembly, where the NEC is going to look at the manner in which that panel is installed. So when that panel goes into the plant and the service gets hooked up to it. So NEC Article 409 covers industrial control panels. That article now references UL508A in a few places. They both describe the industrial control panel with the same definition. Article 409 is about 2 pages long, where UL508A is about 200 pages long. Now there's other aspects of the NEC that are covered in 508A, but that's just a good for instance. And then on top of that, we've got NFPA 79. And so NFPA 79 is going to be the electrical standard for industrial machinery. And so that is going to kind of encompass the machine as a whole, not just the control panel. An easy way to think about the relationship between 508A and NEC is that kind of like the relationship between the components of UL508 and how they're used in that assembly, that panel assembly. 508A is going to be a component of that NEC installation. So, good question. Is it required? Do I need to have UL508A on my panel? It's actually not mandatory by law or regulation. So technically, no. You don't need it. However, by the end of the slide, you're going to see the answer to that question is more of a resounding yes. So even though it's not mandatory or required, compliance with UL508A is required by electrical inspectors, insurance providers, equipment purchasers, just that overall compliance. And so a good for instance there is Minnesota statute. You can see I have posted here, or excerpts from it. And that is 3801.3620 subdivision 3. And it really in a nutshell says if the panel is not listed, it falls on the purchaser or the electrician overseeing the installation to provide proof to the electrical inspector that the equipment complies with applicable electrical standards. When I say it falls on the purchaser electrician, that's usually always pushed back on the OEM or the manufacturer of the panel. So really it's going to fall on that panel supplier. But you can see that to provide all of this proof, that would be a huge undertaking for any one of the individuals, and they typically don't want to take on, such as the master electrician, let's say, he's not going to want to take on that responsibility. And so for that reason, most purchasers and electricians are going to just require UL508A. So it makes it easier for everyone, really. So some of the criteria that goes into listing a panel is, first and foremost, you need to use listed or recognized components, and we'll cover recognized components in a minute on the next slide. But those components are going to be your wire, your terminals, controllers, all those individual devices. We need to make sure that we have properly sized circuit protection. We need to know the difference between branch circuit protection and supplementary protection, properly sized motor overloads, properly sized wiring, and not just properly sized, but properly marked. We need to show the label on the spool that the wire came from. Like when we have an inspection, UL inspector in for an inspection, and part of that is because wire is the most counterfeit product with the UL mark. So wire is one of the #1 items that gets counterfeited for UL. So they need to see that spool that the wire came off of. Many of these components will have space requirements. And these are usually devices that are heat producing. So you'll have space requirement. This is excerpt out of a manual for a power supply, and you just need that air convection to and from. Sometimes you can stack components together side by side. Sometimes you'll have a horizontal space requirement also. And so we need to make sure that you abide by all those space requirements. Markings and labels. There's required markings, and there's even required placement for some of those markings. These include nameplates, warning labels, fuse and overload callouts, schematics. Kind of all of that, encompass all that documentation. And then you also have to have a short circuit current rating established for that assembly, which we'll get into in a minute also. First, though, we have listed versus recognized. A listed component is going to bear that UL logo with the circle around it, and these are the devices that have actually been tested and confirmed, certified for use in industrial control panel, and many other electrical installations. But we can also use recognized components. So products can be UL recognized, which means they were tested or found to be safe in particular instances. And so those are going to be reviewed and accepted by the final application. So if we as an OEM or a panel builder are utilizing a recognized component in a control panel, we need to ensure that the application meets the requirements of that, either described in our UL procedure, or we find them in supplement SA. So that's a supplement to the UL508A standard. Good, for instance, here, the circuit breaker shown and the power supply are both UL listed, where the terminal blocks that you find in many control panels are recognized, and the recognized symbol is that backwards UR for some reason. Lastly, here we have short circuit current ratings and available fault current. So starting with available fault current, any incoming electrical service to a building has an available fault current. This is the maximum current available if you had a short circuit, such as short to ground. The NEC requires that available fault current is marked on the service equipment, the panel board, switchboard, switchgear. So in other words, the breaker panels will have that available fault current listed. So then the components, the individual components will have a short circuit current rating, the SCCR, and that's going to be listed by the manufacturer. Sometimes it's listed right on the component. Sometimes you have to look it up in a data sheet, but there will be an SCCR assigned to any of those components that go in that panel. So the SCCR for for that panel will then need to be calculated based on those component ratings and your circuit design or circuit layout. So and then that overall SCCR needs to be listed on the nameplate. So much like the NEC requires it to be listed on the breaker panels, we need to list that on the nameplate of the control panel. So then that the SCCR of that equipment has to be greater than the available fault current of the service. So if we have an available fault current, these fault currents are typically expressed in thousands of amps or in KA. So you can see from this excerpt out of an Eaton catalog that we see them in 10 KA, 18 KA, 35, all the way up to 200 KA. The minimum, the lowest rating is 5 KA. In this case, you can see miniature fuses typically have a rating of 10 KA. However, if you follow that out to the right, we can get those in up to 18, 35, 65, all the way up to 200 KA. So if we have a panel that's rated for 10 KA, and we have an available fault current at the service to that panel of 18 KA, that panel is never going to pass inspection. It's not going to be able to be installed in that application. So we'd have to go back and change some of those components in the panel to be able to get that SCCR rating up to over 18. So 20, 25, 35, 100, and able to once we get that panel to a say 25 KA, now we can install that in an 18 KA service or a service with an 18 KA available fault current. So that is SCCR in a nutshell. And that wraps up our UL508A overview. Again, these are just some of the highlights of the UL508A standard. That standard is over 200 pages long. Include that supplement essay in there for another 57 pages. And you can see there's a lot to learn and know about it. But I hope this was helpful. Thank you.